Hi, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of Radiate with Steve Schwarzman. Before we get to that conversation, this episode is brought to you by Earth Class Mail. Now, this is really cool. If you've ever thought about starting up your own small business from your home, but you don't want to use your home address, use Earth Class Mail because it moves your snail mail to the cloud, giving you instant access 24/7. It also integrates with the tools and services you use every day. You also get a real professional address to share publicly with customers, business partners, investors, anybody that you do business with. Now that I've checked out Earth Class Mail myself, I think it's brilliant for anybody who's starting their own business. Visit earthclassmail.com/radiate and you'll get your first month of service free when you sign up. That's earthclassmail.com/radiate.
What defines success?
I'm not good with defeat. If I have a vision of something I'd like to do, I like to pursue it.
What happens when you get knocked down?
I've been rejected from things in my life. It's just another moment.
What makes some people radiate?
Life is long, and as long as you are excellent, things work out for you.
This is Radiate.
Hey guys, welcome to Radiate, the show where we interview some of the world's most successful people to find out how they work their way to the top. This week, we've got another very special guest, Steve Schwarzman, the founder and CEO of Blackstone and one of the country's wealthiest people. He's a philanthropist, a Wall Street dealmaker, and owns a variety of companies through his private equity firm, including the Waldorf Astoria Hotels, theme parks like Legoland or Madame Tussaud's Wax Museum, and even Crocs. But Steve wasn't born into money. He had to work his way up from the streets of Philadelphia to get to where he is today. In this conversation, we talk about a decision that changed his life at an early age, how he handles rejection, and what you can do to impress him. Here you go. So, Steve, what are some of the elements of your life that made you so successful?
All these things are, a complex series of factors. I was from a nuclear family. Mm-hmm. I had a father and a mother and sort of grandparents, and they were pretty driven, which was normal for post-World War II families, for their children to have a better life than they did. That drive is accentuated, I think, from, being Jewish in that generation. So there was a great desire on the parents' part for the children to be successful. Secondly, I moved out of Philadelphia where you were raised. You went to Central, and I went to the suburbs because that's where my mother wanted to move us. And my dad didn't much want to move us because it was farther away from our store. But my mother wanted me in a better school district. Mm-hmm. And so that was...
So that decision...
That decision changed my life because I went to Huntington Junior High School in Abington, at Abington High School. There's great education compared to what I would have gotten. And that was a real game changer. Plus, they had great athletic fields. And I was an athlete, and that made it easy. And then I became head of the school and all those student leader things. And that really put me on a course that was great. And then I was lucky enough to go to Yale, which was one of the great...
But you got rejected from Harvard, right?
I was on the waiting list from Harvard. And so ultimately I didn't get in there, but I did.
Was that, by the way, a moment that kind of changed you?
No, I mean, I've been rejected from things in my life. It's just another moment that was disappointing.
Steve, I read this great anecdote that you had gotten this letter from Harvard saying, sorry, you're on the waiting list. You're on the waiting list. And you actually called the dean and said, please let me in. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. I thought that they had made an error. Or if they hadn't made an error, at least they weren't satisfying my objective.
But you see, that's incredible. Most people wouldn't do that. Most people would look at that and accept that decision. So what is it that you decided, I'm going to tell this guy he made a mistake?
Well, I'm not good with defeat. And if I have a vision of something I'd like to do, I like to pursue it. And if you don't, achieve that objective, you find another way. And I guess the Chinese would say they know where they're going, they just don't know how they're going to get there. And so, it's like something going down a stream and there's a rock. The water goes on either side. You don't know which side you'll be going, but you will get downriver, right? And so I tend to look at things from a imagination point of view of how I would like something to work, whether it's in the charitable area or whether it's our business or whether it's a vacation or whatever it is. How would I like this to be? And then I like to make it.
Think of the goal first.
Yeah, I like to think of so I call it a worthy fantasy, and then I like to pursue that to make it happen.
And so if something goes in your way,
you just find a way around it,
So
I've also found in my life it's harder to have those great visions or great fantasies than the actual achievement of that. In other words, you have to always stake out really important goals because you only have so many shots on goal, right? Because if you're doing one thing, you can't be doing another. It's very hard to do two things simultaneously. Yes, major initiatives. So in that point in my life, and I wanted to go to Harvard. That was defined as a good goal, and I was on the waiting list, so it was quite natural for me to want to call them and try and figure out how could I.
What was the response by the dean?
He was terrific. He said, "Thank you for the call." He said, "I don't normally talk with applicants, and I'm sorry to tell you that no one will be getting in off of the waiting list because it's not about you. It's just we've had so many acceptances that we won't be taking anyone." And he asked me where else I was accepted and what my plans were. And I told him I was planning on going to Yale. He said, "That's an excellent decision. I'm sure you'll be very happy there," which I was. And that was that.
I'm sure he's regretting that decision now.
Yeah, he was funny. He did send me a note later in life saying, I think we made a mistake. But he said, "I've got a tough job. It's hard to know with 17 and 18-year-olds how things will work out."
And I'm kind of curious on the other end now when you see young guns coming up on Wall Street and in finance, and you see these students that going through the public school system. Do you ever know who is going to shine? Who is going to be the star?
That's part of what we do. That's part of being in a position that I'm in. And I interview people all the time. Usually now, at the beginning of the firm, I interviewed anybody.
Right, everybody.
That we had. There was no one else to do it. As the firm's gotten larger, usually people are screened before they get to me. But I really enjoy meeting people in that kind of setting. And
what questions would you ask people just to know, to kind of cut through?
Well, there's a reason I'm not in your business, Betty, because I'm pretty undisciplined. I have no idea what I'm going to ask somebody before they come in a room. I look at them. I try and sense, something about them. Usually there's a CV. If I read that, sometimes there's an odd thing on that I'll ask them about, or if I've just finished a very interesting phone call before that, and I'm thinking about what's going on, and it's an interesting problem or issue, I'll just throw it right on the table, ask them what they think about that, since I'm still thinking about it, and see how their mind works. And what I'm trying to do is figure out, how smart somebody is, how analytic they are, how intuitive they are, how they'll be under pressure, how articulate they are, how stable they are. Because in our world, there's always pressure of some type or another, some big problem that is turning into a quasi mess, and you have to deal with it. And how will that person deal with stress? And so usually I find it pretty easy to talk to people about themselves. They like talking about themselves, as you know, because you're doing that right now. And usually people give themselves away with their eyes. And I'm always very focused on their eyes and whether they seem to be comfortable in a setting, how fast are they processing things, are they interesting? Would I like to see this person a second time? And do they have a gift or not? And so it's a bit of a adventure. And so I enjoy that adventure of trying to figure somebody out. And, you know, we've got a pretty good record of doing that.
Hiring great talent, yeah.
You know, identifying
I think you're absolutely
talent.
right, though, about the eyes. I think the eyes give away a lot
Yes.
on what people are thinking in their minds.
As they say, what do they say? Eyes are the window on the soul.
Right.
And, you know, they give away a lot. And I was at Harvard at the business school with basically a group of women who were, one of the questions they asked me, women, first-year MBA students, about interviews. What should I do in an interview? I mean, do you have any advice? And I said, sure. I said, you should just be yourself. Imagine you're meeting somebody who actually just wants to know who you are. Mm-hmm. All you want to do is tell them who you are. There should be no inhibition to doing this. You know, you have the same goal. They're trying to figure you out. You're trying to present yourself. Don't be nervous, and just be easy but
most people are nervous, right?
Yeah, but they shouldn't be, because you both have the same objective.
Right.
And nobody wants to hire the wrong person. You don't want to end up in the wrong place. So I said, this isn't an adversarial proceeding in terms of interviewing someone. It's a good thing for everybody, and you should just relax and, you know, enjoy that experience.
When we return, Steve on how he finds the time to give away his money. How does he make the biggest impact with his billions? But first, this. This episode of Radiate is brought to you by Pipedrive. If you're an entrepreneur, you know that selling can be tough, but it doesn't have to be. Pipedrive is the CRM for small teams with big ambitions. They take the pain and frustration out of tracking deals with things like email and spreadsheets. Salespeople and entrepreneurs, they love Pipedrive because it visualizes your sales pipeline. They highlight opportunities and they also highlight potential problems, ensuring that important activities and conversations don't get dropped. Sales managers love it because they don't need to nag their teams to use their CRM. Pipedrive is easy to use and simple to get started. You can be up and running in just minutes. And if you need extra help, Pipedrive also has some great tutorials, and they have an incredibly supportive customer service team. Some other cool things about Pipedrive include forecasting, iOS and Android mobile apps, some great integrations with the likes of Google Apps, MailChimp, Zapier, Yesware, and so many more. They've also got a powerful API for those that like to build their own software solutions. So head over to pipedrive.com/radiate to start your 30-day free trial today. This episode is also brought to you by Stamps.com. These days, you can get practically everything on demand, like this podcast. Listen whenever you want, when it's convenient for you. So why are you still going to the post office and dealing with their limited hours when you can get postage on demand with Stamps.com? Anything you can do at the post office, you can do right now from your computer with Stamps.com. You can buy and print official U.S. postage stamps using your own computer and printer. You can print postage for any letter or package, and then you just hand it to your mail carrier. Unlike the post office, Stamps.com never closes, right? So you can get postage whenever you need it, 24/7. Right now, sign up for Stamps.com and use the promo code RADIATE for the special offer. 4-week trial plus $110 bonus offer, including postage and a digital scale. You can weigh all your packages. So don't wait. Go to Stamps.com before you do anything else. Well, you want to finish this podcast first. Click on the microphone at the top of the homepage and type in Radiate. That's Stamps.com. Enter Radiate. So Steve, you've donated money to the New York Public Library, created the Schwarzman Wing, You donated money to New York City kids to ensure they get a top education. You've given back to your high school and to Yale. I mean, charity seems to be an important part of what you do. So why is that? Why do you give?
Well, I do other things too, Betty. It's besides those large things. And I do this for a number of different reasons. The first is that's what people in my family did. My grandfather, always gave a lot of money to different causes. And so I saw that as a child. And he was sort of the dominant person in the family. And so it's sort of a family type thing. It's what you do when you become successful enough to be able to do those things.
And your dad owned a grocery chain, is that right?
No, we had a store that was sort of like Bed Bath & Beyond, that kind of store. And my grandfather owned it, and then my dad and my grandfather owned it, and they asked me if I wanted to join them, and the answer was no. I didn't want to be doing that. And so I went into finance, ironically, as did my brothers, because we all decided we didn't enjoy folding towels as much. But in terms of giving, I like to do things that are large and unique. I like making change, impacting people. And to do that takes time. And one thing I don't have a lot of is time. I have a full-time job at Blackstone. So the number of things that you can do charitably that require reinvention of something to impact people. And I like to do things in the educational area. I like changing people's lives. I like giving people a better shot. I like positively impacting the world. And I'm very fortunate that Blackstone's done exceptionally well. We have great people, and we're in wonderful sort of strategic positioning. We're growing rapidly, and we have been.
Right.
And so,
but it gives you the resources to be able to do
as part
this,
of that.
right?
You end up creating more and more resources if your company is good. And it doesn't matter whether it's called Blackstone or whether it's called Apple or whether it's called Microsoft or Uber. It doesn't matter what it is called. You create more resources, and I'm a significant owner of the business, and so I get a large dividend stream. And the question is, after a certain point, what do you do with this? And
when did you get to that point, Steve?
Oh, geez, it changes with your life. When you start with nothing, and you have a little bit more, you're that much closer to that point, and you just scale up your ambition to different points in your life. But there's a practical nature that if you don't give it away and do something of interest, somebody will give it away after you're not here anymore. And so.
And does that scare you in any way?
You mean not being here anymore?
Well,
this is just,
that might be one,
right.
But the fact that someone else might have control over what you've built and what you've accumulated.
I've actually come to terms with that, because I literally can't spend the time to give money away and create things if I'm doing my Blackstone activities, which I really love. And so I won't have enough time to do that, because you really have to scale up to very large scale. And so I've come to the conclusion that you practically can't do that. So I'd like to do a variety of things, which in the charitable world, and the interesting thing that happens, Betty, is that you don't know exactly what you want to do before you see changes in the world and what's needed. There are always certain things that are needed in the medical area. For example, you want to cure diseases or make medical care more accessible. Those are somewhat ongoing, but I like intercepting things that have a need that perhaps wasn't there at an earlier point. And so, I'm interested in helping people, so I got involved with the Inner City Scholarship Fund, which is the parochial schools in New York City, and that's an amazing thing where my wife and I are sponsoring about 300 kids, I think, something like that, and this is a system where 70% of the kids are either at or below the poverty level, and 90% are minorities. And this is a skew that if they were in the public school system would have a graduation rate of 50 to 60%, something of that type. And this system graduates 99% of the kids.
Wow.
It is an astonishing outcome. And so we like supporting that because
you can see that difference.
Yeah, I write notes.
And it's immediate.
I write notes to the kids. So
What do you say?
They're very well run, not-for-profit and system, and they send report cards to me. And so I look at all the report cards, and kids are doing well in certain subjects or not as well, or they've been absent more or something.
Right.
So I write them a personal note on my stationery because I think that's a good thing for them to get, and I comment on something in their report card so they know it's been read and that somebody cares about them. And then when they graduate, you meet them. I mean, I could meet them earlier. There's only so many things I can physically do, but it's really neat. And they write you notes during the year thanking you for changing their lives, and they'd be in some other school system.
But you know how much that means to have a personal note handwritten by Steve Schwarzman commenting on something that they have done. You know how much that means, though, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's why I do it, because I want these kids to understand that not only is somebody paying for them, which they know, but that somebody cares about them. And that's part of the process of helping to make change. You can do it on a really big systemic basis, or you can do it one by one. And you see the changes in these people, and you ask them, "What are you doing?" "I'm going to be an accountant. I'm going to be a nurse. I'm going to college for this." And they're going to be, like good members of society. They're going to be paying taxes. They're going to have nice families. They're going to have what we would call, sort of a very good middle income type of life, which if they didn't have those educational opportunities, they wouldn't necessarily have that outcome.
They wouldn't have
Same
that
person,
opportunity.
Same people. And so, I enjoy that. And, there are many things that people can do and do for other people. It's part of an American gestalt, which doesn't exist almost anywhere else in the world.
If one of these students were to ask you, Steve, you're so successful, I want to learn so much from you, from your career. What's been your biggest challenge in your career? How can I learn from you?
Boy,
your biggest challenge.
There are so many challenges, Betty. First thing is that when you go out on your own, you basically don't know nearly as much as what's going to be facing you as you thought. The second thing is not everybody hopes you're going to be successful. In fact, a lot of people hope you'll fail. This may be a New York disease, but it's the
Did you get that a lot?
It's the human condition that, not everybody likes somebody else to be wildly successful. And so that's something that's different.
Do you just ignore it then? You just ignore that noise?
Well, you have to, because you can't deal with that. You have to go through. You also find out, most entrepreneurs, if you ask, I was just listening to John Doerr, who's the senior partner at Kleiner Perkins, which is perhaps the best known or most successful venture firm. And he said, when we back a company, well, what we find is that whatever their business plan is when they start, it will change. He said it's really all about the people. They have to be adaptable. They have to be flexible. They have to be able to change and have enormous perseverance and staying power along with flexibility. He said the business plan is something just at that one point in time seems like the right thing to do. He said it seldom is rolled out the way we approve it.
Well, businesses pivot almost all the time,
Yes.
right?
So
did your business pivot early on?
Yeah, well, we had the right strategic plan, which was to go into the advisory business and then go into private equity. So that was the first part of the plan. The third part of the plan was to start a series of businesses. We didn't know what they'd be, basically attacking paradigm-changing opportunities. So if we were going into a dramatic recession, for example, we ended up going into the financial restructuring business. After the recession crushed all in its path, we ended up going into the real estate business because nobody was buying real estate. And so we adapted to each of those. But what we did with each of those programs is we had a great opportunity. We insisted on hiring somebody to run it who was a 10 on a scale of 10. And we only went into businesses that made our existing businesses stronger, created more intellectual capital so the firm itself could be better and better.
Right.
And so we articulated that when we went into business, that would be the strategy. But we had no idea where that would take us.
Right,
It's
what
like
that
zero.
would be exactly.
Right, you couldn't know. So you have to adapt. So there are so many lessons. We don't have enough time to go over all the lessons, the painful lessons learned as an entrepreneur.
Well, how about before we go then, Steve? Someone who wants to recreate, let's say that there's someone now, another Steve Schwarzman Jr. who wants to recreate a Blackstone. What would your advice be to him or her?
Well, I just had one come in. A younger person had gone to Harvard, super bright, has started a financial company in one area, and he's very successful. And people were starting to give him offering him massive amounts of money to go into different types of businesses because he was successful at one. And the advice I gave him was, as tempting as it was to take huge amounts of money, don't do it. And the reason not to do it is I didn't felt this particular person really knew how to run those other businesses and make decisions that were informed, because his skills were not particularly in that area, even though those other businesses looked like they were similar. They actually were different. And I could tell he was uncomfortable, which is why he came in to see me. And I told him there's nothing wrong with expanding, but you have to do it totally in your comfort zone. So you can take your basic business and either concentrate geographically doing something similar, or taking one of the parts of that business that you're already in and making that much bigger. But don't go into something you actually don't know much about in the hopes that you're going to get really financially successful and rewarded. I said,
even
inevitably,
though people are throwing money at you.
Yes, even though people think you're like terrific and
they're like, you're great.
Here's like $500 million for this and $500 million for that. I said, when you get older, you'll know what you could truly handle. And there'll always be money, maybe not at this scale, but if you do nothing but, like a shoemaker, basically stick to your last and expand within that comfort zone and always be successful, people will always reward you if you have outside success. But don't stray to things you really don't intuitively understand. So there are little, I call it logic and tricks of the trade that sometimes people sort of wander because they're seduced.
It's ego, Steve, right?
I don't know that it's ego. I think it's more, I want to be more important. I want to have a more important scale business. I want to be able to earn more money. I want to show I can do something. I want to take advantage of the gifts that I have. There's clearly a gifted person. But they don't understand how to get from one place to another without blowing themselves up, right? So he left very cheerful because
even though you told him don't do it.
I told him not to do something.
And you think he's not going to do it?
That intuitively I don't think he wanted to do, but it was so financially compelling. He thought maybe he should do it. and he's going to be very successful anyhow. I mean, life is long, and as long as you are excellent, things work out for you.
Next week on Radiate, Jay Margolis, a retail veteran who's loved and lived women's fashion, from Liz Claiborne to The Limited to most recently Cachet, what he's learned from running some of the biggest retail brands. Thanks for joining us. I'm Betty Lou. If you liked what you heard, please review us on iTunes and find me on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. See you next week on Radiate.